Someone's driving behind a truck full of logs, one log slips, and suddenly it's a full-on deadly domino effect. Final Destination basically made an entire generation terrified of trucks on the highway. But let's actually think about this for a second with some real physics. Those logs are heavy. Like a single pine log can weigh anywhere between 500 to over 2,000 kilograms depending on its size. Now, when something that heavy is sitting on a flat truck bed, it has what physicists call potential energy, basically stored energy based on its position. For a log lying flat and low on a truck, that potential energy is actually pretty minimal. It's not perched up high ready to fall, it's basically already at ground level. Now for it to slide off and fly toward your car, it would need a serious horizontal force, something strong enough to overcome both the friction between the logs and the truck bed and the tension of the actual straps holding them down. Those straps are rated to handle thousands of kilograms of force. We're talking about the kind of force you'd need from a pretty violent crash or a catastrophic equipment failure, not just a bumpy road. And even if a log somehow broke free, here's where it gets interesting. Because of inertia, the log would actually tend to stay moving at roughly the same speed as the truck. So instead of dramatically launching backwards like a missile into your windshield, it would more likely just tumble and roll to the side of the road. Newton's first law isn't exactly cinematic. For a log to fly back at your car like in the movies, the truck would basically have to stop instantly, and at that point, you've got much bigger problems than the logs. Movies love a good giant stomping through cities, crushing cars, stepping on tiny screaming humans. Looks terrifying on screen. But here's a fun science fact: giants can't actually exist, like physically can't. The bigger something gets, the way its weight scales up is way faster than the way its bones and muscles grow. So a giant would literally collapse under its own weight the second it tried to stand up. Real-life giants like really tall humans already struggle with serious bone and joint problems. So relax, no one's getting stepped on. Okay, this one's personal because so many of us were low-key terrified of quicksand as kids. Movies made it look like a random sinkhole just waiting to swallow you whole in the jungle. Reality check: quicksand is real, but it's basically just wet sand. And here's the thing, you float in it. You don't sink to the bottom like the movies show. It's more like being stuck in really thick mud. Annoying? Yes. Deadly? Almost never. You'd have to actively try really hard to drown in quicksand. It's not the villain movies made it out to be. Every AI movie ever, AI gets turned on, thinks for 2 seconds, decides humans are the enemy, launches the nukes. Done. Real AI does not work like that at all. Current AI systems are essentially very advanced pattern-matching tools. They don't want anything, they don't have survival instincts. There's no secret moment where the computer wakes up and starts plotting. The actual concerns researchers have about AI are way more boring and complicated than a robot deciding to take over the world in an afternoon. No dramatic villain monologue, just math. A lot of math. Spider-Man got bit by a radioactive spider. The Hulk got blasted with gamma rays, and suddenly superpowers, cool concept, absolutely horrifying in real life. Radiation doesn't rewrite your DNA in a cool, useful way. It just damages it. We're talking cancer, cell death, organ failure, not wall climbing. If a radioactive spider bit you, the story would end at the hospital, not at a superhero montage. Mutations from radiation are random and almost always harmful. You've seen it. A character takes a pill, unlocks the other 90% of their brain, and suddenly they're a genius who can predict the stock market and learn Mandarin in an hour. Here's the truth, this is just completely made up. Neuroscientists have been saying this for decades and nobody's listening apparently. Brain scans show that we use virtually all of our brain, just not all at once. Different regions activate for different tasks. While you're reading this, your visual cortex is working, your language centers are firing, your memory regions are active. Over the course of a day, pretty much every part of your brain gets used. And think about it from an evolutionary standpoint. Your brain is only about 2% of your body weight but burns roughly 20% of your total energy. Nature does not keep something that expensive running just to use a tenth of it. That's like paying full rent for an apartment and only living in the bathroom. There's no locked door in your head, no secret genius waiting for a pill. Action hero shoots a car explodes. Hero walks away in slow motion. Real life, a bullet hitting a car does basically nothing dramatic. A regular fuel tank is not sensitive enough to ignite from a bullet impact alone. Gasoline actually needs a very specific air-to-fuel vapor ratio and an ignition source to combust. A bullet punching a hole in a tank mostly just makes a hole and leaks gas. Even shooting at a gas station pump, which sounds terrifying in movies, wouldn't cause a fireball in reality. The activation energy needed to ignite fuel in that context is way higher than what a bullet impact provides. Mythbusters actually tested this extensively and basically confirmed that Hollywood explosions require Hollywood conditions. Explosions are just genuinely hard to cause, which is good, but deeply disappointing for action movies. Window gets shot on a plane and suddenly everyone's getting violently sucked toward the hole like a vacuum cleaner. Okay, so decompression is a real thing and it is dangerous, let's be fair. But the sucked out through a tiny hole part, way exaggerated. Here's the physics. At cruising altitude, the pressure inside a plane is maintained at roughly the equivalent of being 6,000 to 8,000 feet above sea level, while outside it's the equivalent of about 35,000 feet. There is a pressure difference, yes, but a small hole doesn't create an instant vacuum. The air rushes out to equalize, it doesn't turn into a portal that grabs people. You'd need a very large structural failure for the kind of cinematic chaos movies show. A bullet hole or a cracked window, you'd feel a sharp pressure change, your ears would pop like crazy, it'd get very cold and loud, but you're not getting launched out of your seat. The hole would need to be roughly body-sized for that to even be in the realm of possibility. And at that point again, bigger problems. Lightning hits someone, they wake up in a hospital and suddenly they can see the future, run super fast, or hear people's thoughts. It's basically a free superhero origin story in movies. Real lightning bolt physics. A single strike carries around 1 billion volts and reaches temperatures of roughly 30,000 Kelvin. That's about 5 times hotter than the surface of the sun, for a fraction of a second. What does that actually do to a human body? It can stop the heart, cause severe burns along the path the current travels, damage the nervous system, and cause lasting neurological issues. People do survive lightning strikes, around 90% actually, but they deal with chronic pain, memory problems, and personality changes, not telepathy. The electricity doesn't rewire your neurons into a supercomputer, it just disrupts them badly. The idea that the same thing that fries your electronics would somehow upgrade your brain is a fun thought, but thermodynamics isn't really in the business of doing favors. This one shows up more than you'd think. Hero has a giant magnet, villain's gun flies out of their hand, bullet stops midair. Yes, most guns and bullets contain steel and steel is magnetic. But the force required to actually pull a gun away from someone's grip or stop a bullet in flight is enormous. A bullet leaves a gun barrel at anywhere between 370 to over 900 meters per second depending on the type. The kinetic energy of that bullet, a half MV2, is massive. To magnetically stop it, you'd need a magnetic field so powerful it would be pulling every metal object in a wide radius toward it, fillings in your teeth, the iron in your blood, every piece of metal in the building. We're talking MRI machine-level magnetic fields, which themselves are already dangerously strong. And even then, stopping a fast-moving projectile mid-flight with magnetism alone isn't really how magnetic force works on moving ferromagnetic objects at that speed. The geometry and physics just don't cooperate. So no, your hero can't casually hold up a magnet and disarm someone, but it does make for a great scene. We'll give movies that one. You can join our community by subscribing to the channel.